Well, let's, speaking of holidays, it's always a holiday when we get to bring John Rothman on the Mark Thompson show. I used to get to sit with this guy every single evening, and now I get him once a week, but it's still great that I get to have him at all. It's John Rothman, everybody. Yay. John, of course, a political historian, a presidential historian, a political analyst, a former KGO talk show host, a teacher, a lecturer, and a brilliant, brilliant friend. John Rothman, can you talk a little bit about Juneteenth and the history there?
Well, it's an important holiday because it
Mm-hmm.
was a year after the Civil War. It was finally the word got to Texas that slaves were free.
Yep.
And why didn't we know about it? Because nobody knew about it. It's a holiday that existed for some, but not nationally. And really, a group of people in Congress moved to have this become a national holiday, and that's the way it is now. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it's an important observance of an important event. And so, I'm glad you asked the question.
Yeah. Let's move on to politics. Did you see that there's a bad guy party underway? It's like a convention of bad guys going on. At least that's what it looks like. Vladimir Putin is saying hello to Kim Jong Un. They're getting together, and the pictures of them shaking hands and all the pomp and circumstance of their meeting. Is this, I mean, I know when they put out pictures and this kind of whole thing is staged, they're sending a message to the world. Can you help me fill in what that message is?
It's a real axis of evil. There really is an axis of evil. It's
Yeah.
Russia, China, it's North Korea, it is that and Iran, that amalgamation, which really is an axis of evil. And you can throw in the radical Islamists, the Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, and they have an alliance. And that
Hmm.
is, oh, there you can see the red carpet and all the
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah.
Putin had not been to North Korea in 24 years. They've got together. And the thing that's important is that many of the munitions that Russia uses comes from North Korea. So it's very significant, very dangerous, and it goes to show the importance of the alliance that exists, what used to be called SEATO, the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, which no longer exists, but it's the United States, New Zealand, Australia, the Philippines, all working together, along with Taiwan,
Hmm.
to resist the expansion of this axis of evil. Does it? Go ahead.
It seems like it, it's been for a long time democracy versus communism, democracy versus fascism. And you have these dictators that get together and band together with their countries. And I think Putin said even a new fundamental document has been drafted to lay a long term foundation for relations with Kim Jong Un. So you have that, and then you have the fight against it with democratic countries. And it's something that has never gone away. But now it seems like some democratic countries are shifting more toward this, I don't know, this thing we've always fought against, this dictator happy kind of zone. And is there enough support for democratic countries and the our way of life and our way of doing things and our values to keep up this fight? Does that make
That's why
sense?
That's why
Yeah.
NATO is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why NATO will be a central issue in this campaign. Donald Trump downplays NATO, downplays the Western alliance. And the important thing to understand is that alliance is what has preserved liberty. And so when you see this kind of an axis of evil, and it really is an axis of evil, and it confronts the West, hopefully the West will be more unified. Let me point out to you that NATO now includes Sweden and Finland, two traditionally neutral nations, which joined because they see the threat.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be very important in this campaign.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's NATO. Look at that. Um, well, maybe because we have more countries and in that support that there will be, but it just seems like even here in America where we've, for so long we've held these beliefs, now we have a big portion of the country that is sliding away. We have Steve Bannon calling for civil war. We kind of using these pre-Civil War era
Victory
terms.
or death. right? I got
Yeah,
it.
war to the knife, he says. And we have people that believe this. Bannon says we should dismantle the American system of government and start again.
And that
Uh,
will all be rejected by the American people. I think it's very clear. The extremes in this country never triumph. Donald Trump, I would like to point out to you, has never won an election in terms of the popular vote. I don't think he's going to win a popular vote this time either. There are enough people who oppose it. But it is the message that America sends to the world. We are, as Franklin Roosevelt called us, the arsenal of democracy. And if we lose that war, and it is a war of good versus evil against these rogue states, we're in trouble.
yeah.
And so when I look to the strengthening of NATO, I think that's very important, and Joe Biden deserves a lot of credit for that. But you know who really deserves the credit for the strengthening of NATO? Vladimir Putin, because fear has caused this alliance to grow, expand, and be much more together on these issues. So we'll have to see how it all evolves. But who the next president is will matter tremendously in this battle. You know, Trump says if he wins, the war in Ukraine will be over the next day because he'll solve the problem, and that means giving in to Putin. So
No, 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 no. This is a fight for democracy. We can't do that.
okay, but understand, this is not new in America.
Yeah.
We went through this, although no one is listening now, I hope, is old enough to remember 1939, 1940, 1941, when there was a strong isolationist, an America First movement
Yeah.
with Charles Lindbergh and Burton K. Wheeler and Senator Gerald Nye. And these people maintained that we could maintain a fortress America with a vast Pacific Ocean on one side and the vast Atlantic Ocean on the other side, and that we would be able to survive. Let the dictators kill themselves off, they said. Had we not intervened, Hitler would have won the war. And that would have been the unmitigated disaster for the whole world. So there is a lesson here. And the lesson is that we are, in Wendell Willkie's words, one world. And we have to stand together. May I say there are many aspects of Donald Trump that disturb me. I consider him to be an extremely destructive force. But his war against NATO and our allies is the most disturbing thing of all. And by the way, he always says, well, cost us so much money. Let me tell you something, Donald Trump. The cost of a war is much more than the cost of making sure our allies all are buying in to make sure that this alliance lasts.
Speaking of Trump and how much it matters who's elected next, we have these presidential debates coming up. And Trump has said, I can't go into these debates with, armed halfway with this gag order hanging over my head from the hush money trial. He wants to be able to speak freely about everything. Now, what the gag order says is from the hush money trial, you can't talk about the jury. You can't talk about the witnesses that were in the trial. You can't talk about the prosecutors, right? No bad mouthing the prosecutors or their families or the court staff. You can talk about the judge, talk about the case, but just not the witnesses and the specifics. So he tries to appeal this gag order. And yesterday we learned that the highest court in New York State won't take the case, which means the gag order stays in place. Do you think that makes a difference in his approach to the debates and his campaigning?
Why should the trials of Donald Trump be part of the debate? The debate is about national policy. It is about NATO. It is about Ukraine. It is about the future of American health care. It is about the environment. You're going to do a whole segment on the environment, I know, with Rich. Well, later on, I guess. And I know you have Rich Wolkoff on Willie Mays.
Yep.
Look, there is no doubt in my mind that the debate should be focused on issues. Donald Trump's personal issues, his legal issues, that's a whole other issue. But I'll tell you what I'm waiting for, and we will have it before the end of the month, is the verdict by the United States Supreme Court on blanket immunity. And if Donald Trump gets blanket immunity, he's off the hook on a lot of these things. And by the way, people should remember that he's a man who talks about pardoning January 6th insurrectionists, but he's also a man who, if he becomes president, will make sure that none of these issues come to the fore. So there are a lot of issues here to be debated and discussed. But Donald Trump's abuse of power, and that's what it is, needs to be confronted squarely, directly, and without any ambiguity. By the way, they're muting the microphones when they're not speaking in this debate.
I really
Donald
love
Trump
that.
always interrupts.
Yeah, he will. He'll try to interrupt. He'll try to shout him down, probably, even if they have the microphones off. It's interesting. I don't know if it was, it might have been another KGO or it might have been Gil Gross, but someone said recently they have a bet to make. They don't think Trump will even show up for these debates. I think he will, but
Oh, he has to. He
I
has no choice.
I don't think it's going to be the same type of shouting down where we can all hear it, but I think he'll try to do it to rattle President Biden.
We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Biden is being prepared very carefully for this. Biden is an experienced debater himself. And although both of them have memory lapses, and let me point that out, Donald Trump couldn't remember his own White House physician's name, who was also a member of Congress. Was it Johnson or Jackson? You know,
Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating phenomenon. But look, we have two senior citizens who are quite elderly who are in the race for president. Kim, I like to point out that I am in this campaign younger than both of the contenders for the presidency. So I'm leaving the door wide open right now for my running in 4 years.
It could happen.
I mean, this is it's absurd. May I also say what the Republicans have done with video of Joe Biden showing him stumbling or going the wrong way.
Yeah.
The doctored videos are absolutely appalling, and all you have to do is watch them together, the real ones and then the doctored ones, to understand it.
Mm-mm.
And it is unmerciful if you listen, as I do, to Fox. Please note I don't call it Fox News. That would be an oxymoron. I watch what they do on Fox. It's a disgrace.
Well, the people that see the fake videos aren't going to go back and look for the real videos because they buy everything hook, line, and sinker. So
I know, and that's a problem. The next big thing that we'll hear from Donald Trump, no doubt, will be the selection of his running mate. I'm looking forward to that because that will open up a whole bunch of other questions. By the way, I did a podcast the other day that no one else has done in the country, and that is what happens if between now and the conventions, Biden or Trump is eliminated, either because of health or accident or something happens.
Sure.
That emphasizes the importance of the national committees, which would step in to select the new candidate after the convention. But the question is, if something happens before a convention, what happens? And I want to remind you that the only example we really have of that in modern history is Robert Kennedy's assassination. And that was the Kennedy delegates didn't have a majority. He wouldn't have been the nominee based on when he died. But the simple fact is they caucused and decided to vote for George McGovern. What would the Trump delegates do? Would they caucus and decide to vote for somebody else? That would be the alternative. And so that interests me. In the case of the Democrats, there is a clear line of succession because Kamala Harris would automatically, I think, become the presidential nominee.
If Trump goes to the Republican National Convention and has already named a running mate, does that running mate automatically slide up into the top spot?
That's a very good question. That would seem to me to be the obvious conclusion. But let's point out that in order to have a candidate for president or vice president after the convention, it has to be approved by the National Committee. And that we have one example of, and that was when Tom Eagleton withdrew in 1972 and was replaced by Sargent Shriver.
Interesting. Okay.
And that was nothing to sneeze at. And that was the vote of the National Committee. So the other question to ask is, does anybody know who your National Committee people are? Nobody does. Nobody really
Who knows? Who knows who these people are that may have to make a really important decision? But speaking about the Republican National Convention, there's a lot of hoopla over this whole Milwaukee, do I hate it, do I love it thing? Because apparently Trump had said, I hate Milwaukee. And then he got a lot of flap from, of course, the people in Milwaukee. You never want to say you hate a place because then there's bad blood and bad feelings from everyone in the place, right? So you say you hate a major city and they turn on you. And that's kind of what happened. Now, of course,
Albert has
got video. Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Now he says he loves Milwaukee. Now he says it's my decision to pick Milwaukee for the national convention, which isn't true. But let's check out the video. I think Albert's got it for us. But this is crazy. And this is just another one of those incidents where he sticks his foot in his mouth and now he's got to backtrack it, try to figure it out.
Yeah, I was the one that picked Milwaukee, I have to tell you. I was the one that picked it. These lying people that they say, oh, he doesn't like Milwaukee. I love Milwaukee. I said, you got to fix the crime. We all know that. You got to make sure the election's honest. But I'm the one that picked Milwaukee, and the Democrats or the radical left lunatics, as I call them, what they say is just so terrible. They lie, lie, lie.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah.
Keeping him honest, he said.
Yeah.
He didn't pick Milwaukee.
No.
It was the National Committee who chose Milwaukee. And if you listen to the mayor of Milwaukee, who spoke about that, he said, I never had contact with Trump. We made a pitch to the National Committee, which included money and all the rest. So, Donald Trump, they had in that talk, there were identified 20 different lies that he told in that one speech. And
isn't it interesting that he's the one that said, lie, lie, lie? When he says that, he's the one lying, right?
Yeah. Well,
crazy.
It's a disgrace.
Apparently he was going to stay in Chicago because he dislikes Milwaukee so much. And when a reporter called him on it, he's like, oh, no, I'm going to stay in Milwaukee.
Well, remember, he owns a hotel in Chicago.
Yeah.
So what he normally does is he likes to stay in the Trump hotels. I guess the rate when you do that is much better.
Apparently, if you own the place, yeah. Speaking of Republicans, there's a Republican Congresswoman. Her name is Anna Paulina Luna, and she's a Republican out of Florida. And she wants the House Sergeant at Arms, to arrest Attorney General Merrick Garland. She wants him to arrest the Attorney General of the United States for a contempt resolution. And I mean, it seems outrageous. And is this what the GOP, is this what they, this is their focus now?
I guess you could say Congresswoman Luna is a lunatic. And the simple truth is you want to arrest somebody for not complying with a subpoena. How about Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House? Mm-hmm. These are absurd statements, but the Republicans need to be held accountable for all of these sorts of statements that are so ridiculous. And unfortunately, the Republican Party has gone off the rails. Years ago, there was a book written about the party that lost its head. Well, the Republican Party has certainly done that. I find it unfathomable to understand how it is possible for a political party to so go off the rails. The tragedy for the Republican Party is when they lose the election, and I do believe they're going to lose. I think they'll lose badly. When they lose the election, how do they rebuild? Because if you rebuild in the image of Donald Trump, you've got a problem.
Yeah. Going back to debates, the possibility of RFK Jr. joining the debate. He has said he's qualified for enough state ballots, and that's the threshold. You have to be on the ballot in enough states to qualify to go into the debate. He says he's qualified, but there was a CNN Washington Post survey of state election officials that was done yesterday. They say that's not the case. So far, only Delaware, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Utah election officials say that RFK Jr. is going to appear on the ballots there. So while he's likely to appear on ballots in California and Hawaii, that still falls short of what CNN has required, which is 270 electoral votes that he needs to be on the ballot in enough states to get that many.
Now, that's the decision.
And they say he's fallen short.
That's right. And let me tell you, if the League of Women Voters were running this this debate,
Mm-hmm.
they would say the same thing. He doesn't qualify, and he shouldn't qualify. I'm glad he's not on the debate stage. This is a choice that the American people have to make between two paths, the path of Donald Trump or the path of Joe Biden. And I want to repeat, if Joe Biden and Donald Trump vanish, the mantle of those party leaderships would need to be decided either by the National Convention or, in the post-convention period, by the national committees. So these are real issues that people don't even think about. And by the way, these aren't two elderly men. They are not spring chickens. And the odds are that the vice presidential nominee will be even more important because if something happens to the president of the United States, the vice president takes over.
Let's talk about bump stocks. The Supreme Court said bump stocks need to be dealt with at the legislative level, right?
No, they rejected it because there was no standing.
Right. So,
that's right.
So then the Democrats in the Senate, they try to get some bump stock legislation going, and the GOP blocks it.
That's correct.
So it's very frustrating when you see something that so obviously needs to be regulated. We don't want people to be able to fire bullets like this, so many at a time. Obviously, this is not something that's good for our society. And why are the Republicans blocking this? It seems reasonable and sensical. So why would they do this?
Okay, let's begin with the fact that the bump stock ban was instituted during the Trump administration.
Right.
Let's deal, number two, with the fact that the National Rifle Association, which is a major contributor to Republican candidates, opposes the bump stock ban. Number three, all you have to do is talk to anybody who has used a bump stock to understand that the rapid fire that comes from a bump stock equals what a machine gun is.
Right.
The fact is, this is another weakness, I think, of the Republican Party, that the case needs to be made strongly, vigorously, that this is absurd. And the Democrats did try. Chuck Schumer in the Senate wanted a unanimous consent resolution, and it was obstructed by the Republicans. And all I can say to you is that's another issue which is central to the American people, and we have to stand up and just say no. And the power of the NRA has to be broken. And the Republican Party, let me remind you, for years and years, the Republican Party favored gun legislation of some sort. But this is an American tragedy, and the American people need to respond. You know our problem, Kim? There are so many things that we confront, whether it is the question of bump stock, whether it's the question of NATO, whether it's the question of IVF, you can go down the list of all these issues. There are so many. How do you keep them straight? And then people say, well, you raise all those issues, it's just because you don't like Trump. And the answer is no. People have to be held accountable for the positions that they take. And the American people will have to hold the Republican Party accountable. And if polls are any indication, the Republicans are on the wrong side of these issues. And so I can only hope. Look, it's not that I'm anti-Republican. I want everybody to understand that. I want a viable, vibrant two-party system. But when you have a political party so out of step with good, logical, common sense,
right?
Can you imagine an attack on on the idea of women being able to have a child, in vitro fertilization? Can you imagine there's a debate on that? I mean, I give Donald Trump credit. He at least said he's in favor of in vitro. But
with everything he says, then he turns around and he does something different.
Yeah.
He can't be trusted.
And look at the Republican candidates potentially for vice president, all of whom they're being polite when they say they kissed the ring. Let me tell you something. It's a disgrace. But the Republican Party is the only party that can discipline itself. And that means Republican voters have to turn on Donald Trump. And they have to turn on that idea. Remember, I always remind you that it was Donald Trump Jr. who on the ellipse on January 6th said this is no longer the Republican Party, it's the party of Donald Trump.
Right.
And that is something that the Republican Party will have to deal with.
Let's turn from national politics to local politics in San Francisco. There was a mayoral debate. The second mayoral debate happened this week, and it seemed like Mayor London Breed was zeroing in on who she thinks may be her biggest competitor, which is Mark Farrell, who served as an interim mayor for 6 months following the death of Mayor Ed Lee.
That's correct.
And meanwhile, now there's this study that shows San Francisco, and it's one of these, I don't know, I call them rinky-dink studies because they're done by, this organizations like Wallet Hub, and that's what this is. This is Wallet Hub ranking. It's a personal finance website. And so, they're trying to get publicity as well. But they looked at the effectiveness of local leadership, and they calculated a quality of city services score, and they had 36 different criteria. And they looked at that against the city's total per capita budget, and they've figured out that San Francisco is the worst run city in the United States. That is not something Mayor Breed wants to be publicized as she's trying to run for re-election. So can you talk a little bit about what you think is the wrong in San Francisco? Is it, in your opinion, the worst run city in the United States? And did you watch the debate? I know that's a lot at once.
No, it's not the worst run city. It has serious problems, and I can address those individually. As to the debate, there have now been 2 debates. The last one that you're referring to was sponsored by the Democratic County Committee. And what it basically proved to me is that the leading candidates for mayor, there are 3 leading candidates for mayor to be taken seriously. London Breed, who is running for re-election, and by the way, has started commercials here on local television, which I think are pretty good commercials. Mark Farrell, who was the interim mayor, although he was actually mayor of San Francisco, I think, for 8 months. And Mark is very effective. He was my supervisor in our supervisory district, District 2, before he was mayor. And Aaron Peskin, who is the president of the Board of Supervisors, who runs to the left. In the end, the problem in San Francisco is ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
You have to vote for at least 2 to have any credibility at all. And actually, you can vote for up to 10 in ranked choice voting. Kim, I don't know of 10 candidates for mayor. And what is happening now is that everyone is maneuvering because the persons who are eliminated with their votes because of ranked choice, the person casts a ballot, and then their vote, if their lead candidate is discarded, you add that vote to the new total. It completely distorts what should happen.
So weird. And it really makes it like it's the person who gets the most second votes could be the one who wins the election. It's weird.
Even a person with 3 votes down. I mean, it's nuts. But essentially what San Francisco is choosing is whether to maintain London Breed as mayor. Yeah. And Mark Farrell is hot on her heels. The latest polls actually put Mark a little bit ahead. And Aaron Peskin has a very tight group of supporters here in San Francisco. Safai is way down, does not seem to be gaining much traction. And Daniel Lurie, who is running as well, also really an unknown quantity. So we have to wait and see. But the issues of San Francisco, part of it has to do with we have a weak mayor system. That is to say that the mayor has very little power except symbolic power. The advantage of a Dianne Feinstein or a Willie Brown was, first of all, the system was a little different then, but the force of their personalities made a difference. And if you have a person as mayor who maneuvers and knows the city, and that's really the issue. London Breed's advantage and Mark Farrell's advantage and Aaron Peskin's advantage, the 3 of them are veterans of San Francisco politics and understand how the city works or does not work. And that's going to be a real question.
Well, here's what Mayor Breed had to say to Mark Farrell. She told him this is not the Republican National Convention where every answer to public safety is police. She said when Mark Farrell was temporary mayor of San Francisco, property crime was up, car break-ins were up, and violent crime was up. I think he was mayor for 6 months? You say 8 months. How does someone effect change during that brief amount of time? Is that a fair criticism?
No, of course not. This is politics. This is trying to tear down your leading opponent. And the polls now put Farrell ahead. But the simple truth is Mark Farrell is not a Republican. He's a Democrat. Yeah. I've known him for years. He's a San Francisco Democrat through and through. But you could say he's running to the right in the mayor's race, meaning he is viewed as the most conservative candidate, which really isn't true. He is a tremendous force in this city. Who will win? In the end, the Democratic establishment is going to back London Breed. And if London Breed is everyone's second or third choice, she'll win, which is the basic premise which most people, at least that I deal with, are operating under. But you also have the moderate vote, if you will, split because Daniel Lurie and Safai split off another segment of votes. I can't tell you who will win. Nobody can because ranked choice voting is such a disaster. By the way, we have another issue. The superintendent of schools has announced that he is going to have to make recommendations on closing schools here in San Francisco. And believe me, that will have a huge impact in terms of communities and how they feel about things. So there are a lot of unknowns in terms of this mayoralty election. And I would not call these, by the way, debates. What happens is you ask a question, they answer the question, somebody then can counter with another question, but they aren't real debates. It's not you're for or against. For instance, if you ask people about slow streets in San Francisco or closing the Great Highway or John F. Kennedy Drive, or if you talk about height limits or density issues, and those are real issues, here in San Francisco, there's a mandate for more housing units. Well, I have no problem with more housing units, but you've got to be able to have the social services and the basic service. Look, they have a development south of Market, and Whole Foods put in a wonderful market. My son was living right there. And they closed the market. Why? It wasn't in a safe neighborhood. There was a lot of theft. And so that neighborhood no longer has a market. Take a look here in San Francisco at Safeway on Webster, using it and turning it into condominiums. Well,
Yeah.
the people who live there are primarily minority people, a lot of African Americans in that community. Where are they going to do their shopping, for heaven's sake? And there should be a real planning system, and there isn't. And frankly, effective leadership by a mayor of San Francisco, and I gave serious thought to running for that reason. I thought we needed that kind of decisive leadership. But right now, what you're seeing is nitpicking and back and forthing, and what you just used as an example between London Breed attacking Mark Farrell.
Well, John Rothmann, thank you. Before I let you go, I know that we're going to talk about Willie Mays, but you, on the way out, have a Willie Mays story. You used to be neighbors.
Yeah, look, Willie Mays is a San Francisco institution. Growing up, I used to see him regularly. We belonged to the same club. We lived in the same neighborhood. I saw him on a fairly routine basis, but I have a wonderful story to tell you. And if Billy Knox is listening, now he goes by Will. He was 10 years old, and he went out to the ballpark, and I guess he had a problem getting home. And Willie Mays saw him standing there at the bus stop and said, "Come on, I'll give you a ride." He drove Will, and let me tell you, this is great because Billy lived on Jordan Avenue, just around the corner from him. And Billy comes home, and Willie says, "Anytime you need a ride to the ballpark, just let me know." So Billy would call him, and Willie would pick him up. Now, the great story is, first of all, none of his friends believed him. But second of all, Billy's mother insisted on packing a lunch. So they're on the way to the ballpark, and all of a sudden, Billy says, "Oh, my God, I left my lunch at home." Willie says, "Don't worry." We turned around the car, picked up a lunch. But the great thrill for Billy is when he tell his friends, they all thought he was making it up. Until Willie said, "Just have them all gather around. I'll say hello to everybody." And that's exactly what happened. There's stories after stories about Willie Mays and the kindness. His signing of autographs for kids. Yeah. There was once a kid and got an autographed, caught a ball. The ball was taken away from him. Willie immediately had security. He autographed a ball, got a glove, sent it out to the kid. So the kid would have that. And then Willie, after the game, shook hands with the kid. I mean, that's the kind of guy he was. When my son was much smaller, unfortunately, he doesn't remember this. It was the Olympics, and Willie was carrying the torch, and he stopped at our kid's school. And very friendly, very nice, came up to my son, patted him on the head, shook his hand. Samuel was maybe in first grade. He doesn't remember it,
Sure.
But I remember the kindness of Willie Mays. So for those of us who grew up here, and man, I learned a very valuable lesson today. Social media. If you Google Facebook and you just watch all the comments about Willie Mays, all the pictures with people, the fact that he was so accessible. And let me say a word. He didn't have an easy time. He moved to San Francisco as an African American. He had a hard time finding housing. And it was the then mayor of San Francisco, a Republican by the name of George Christopher, who got him his house, helped him in every way, and Willie never forgot that. Yeah. And interesting now, no one thinks about the fact that Willie Mays was black. Willie Mays was Willie Mays. He was beyond color. And that was, I think, the ultimate testimony. Children looking at him were colorblind. They were colorblind because Willie Mays was such a dramatic, dynamic, wonderful figure and a very friendly guy. And so my reminiscences, and all of us have our stories of Willie Mays, those of us who live here. It was one of the great privileges of my life to have shaken his hand. He knew me by name. I knew him, of course. Mm-hmm. And just to see his interaction with people, it is a marvelous testimony to San Francisco as a city that really knows how to do things. And when you say hey, you know who we're talking about.
John Rothmann, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your memories, and we'll see you next week.
May I say one word about Mark Thompson's dad?
Absolutely.
I had the opportunity to interview Mark's father, who wrote a wonderful book on the Electoral College and the question of disputed elections. And he was an absolute delight to have on the program. And the great thing was that Mark's mother was right there on the other line correcting him. And it was absolutely marvelous. So, Mark, I want to extend to you, to your mother, to your family, our deepest sympathy, and tell you how much we appreciated your dad. Yeah. He was truly a Renaissance man, and we love him.
Thank you, John Rothmann. I appreciate it. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.